This is Gemma Cruz Araneta, your host. Are culture and art marketable, or are artists doomed to live a life of penury? But let us not be very negative. I think there is a booming creative industry. What do you think, Nestor?
I think that's true because in a recent survey conducted by the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines for big companies,
yes,
those companies that are based on intellectual property rights or copyrights contribute about 5.8% to our gross domestic product.
Like what,
and 11% to our employment.
That's
that's
good
just
news.
the big companies. What more if we include the underground or the gray economy? So right now, with very little government support, there is a big contribution already. But unfortunately, many of our lawmakers and leaders in government are not aware
that there is such a thing as culture
and creative industry.
The creative industry. Can you give us an example? Just one example.
The creative industry is a wide field.
Okay.
It covers the performing arts, it covers the visual arts, it covers publishing, literature, and printing. It covers design. It covers creative services like advertising, game development. It covers broadcast and new media, including film, television, radio, independent cinema, animation. It also includes...
It's a very broad field.
Yes, the creative services. It also involves cultural sites like museums, libraries, galleries. It also includes cultural festivals.
Oh, all right. So let's ask Jenny. What about the museums? What role do they play in this creative industry?
I think a lot of it has to do with education. But I'd just like to add to what Ness was saying. There's a general lack of understanding for the whole audience and the market out there when they try to understand creative industries vis-a-vis cultural enterprises, which are just as important. So if we were to try to put it in three main pillars, and this is my understanding and from how I try to understand it, is that you have the mixed grouping where you have the performing arts and all the radio, the TV.
So then
that's one aspect of the creative industry. Then you have design and visual, and Ness mentioned all the other things under design and visual. Then you have cultural enterprises, where you have the museums, the galleries, and the intangible heritage sites. So the public themselves sometimes get confused, and all of this is culture when you look at it, because when you look at what culture is, it is everything that we are about, the way we sing, the way we dance, the way we do business, the way we talk, and all of this has, just for purposes of identification, are actually could be put under these three main directions. Just so that as we look at information or audience development or market enhancement, you can actually plan a strategy specific to the three, because both they cannot be the same. You can either do audience development and or market openings. So again, it's a strategy of how you want to be able to let the publics know, and the publics will be the ones who will purchase certain products, enjoy certain expressions, and that's I think key. Your second message about museums is really about information. That's what the museum world is about. You present the best and the highest expression of our people in a museum setting.
Right, right. Now, Imelda, Mr. Hardin said that he doesn't get any help from the government. And you're in the government, you're in the Committee of Galleries in the NCCA.
Well, I think, as Mr. Hardin knows, and I do agree with him, that there is not actually half as much support or enough support as we would want. However, there is actually, the very existence of the NCCA as a grants giving body is actually a step towards the right direction in this. Of course, there is still much to be desired because, for instance, at the NCCA, aside from being a grant giving body, we also seek to really interrelate with the other agencies So we want to make the linkage with the other agencies like the Department of Trade and Industry and Tourism towards this end, that culture be promoted really as a strategy for development. So when we talk about culture and arts, this is not just for arts and culture's sake, because we're here talking about how this could be used for economic advancement as well.
That's quite heavy. Culture as a strategy for development, for national development. Well, let us tackle that later. Well, Amy just said that we should use culture as a strategy for national development. That's heavy stuff, but I think she's right. What do you think, Nestor?
Oh, I think that's very right. You know, many of the public, including our leaders in government and the business sector, regard culture, art and culture as peripheral to our lives. You know,
Sadly enough, that's true.
entertainment,
Yes.
you know, subsidized activities, things that are necessary to our daily lives. Very few of them know, unfortunately, that arts and culture, as I mentioned earlier, contribute to our economy and employ a big number of our Filipino workers, both here and abroad. Now, I was thinking that if we speak the language that they understand, which is the language of economics, I think agencies like the NCCA, the IPO, CITEM, the CCP should pull their resources together and do a creative industry mapping, a comprehensive one, a research on the contribution of arts and culture to our economy, and perhaps our leaders will listen, and perhaps there will be more support for arts and culture and the creative industry.
The Filipinos are a cultural and artistic people. So in this light, I think that's why in any kind of strategizing for development, this should be taken into account. And it is only when we have that sort of holistic approach to it that we can actually talk about legislation furthering our economic and cultural goals. So that, as Ness said, culture will stop becoming just a peripheral concern. It should be, in fact, it should permeate. Yes, all aspects of our national life.
But isn't it ironic, Jenny, that we're supposed to be very creative people, right? Among all Asians or in the world, Filipinos are known to be very creative, yet culture does not really permeate our lives.
I really think that it's a lack of education and understanding of what culture is about. They identify culture basically as arts often, no? And it's really opening the minds of the people in understanding that it is really a whole lot more. That's why we were talking about the creative industry. That is our culture. It is expression. And when you look at development, development is towards a goal to make our country have a very good stand in the global community, to make that uniqueness stand out there. And what would make us stand out in a world where everything is just looking the same is our culture. Unique. It's a way about branding, likewise, about how we project ourselves out there. And that's where government's role is, to be able to be the one who can at least bring together this perception so that development all the way down to the simple artists could be enhanced. I think that the key direction is really not just government's work, but private sector as well. And there are a lot of other people around who are working when it comes to trying to be able to help cultural communities, the smaller artists, the independent groups, to come together. But at the end, the one who will give that glue will be policy, direction, and the way government is pushing forward. It will have to come together. That is my belief. No, we cannot rely on government alone. There needs to be a partnership clearly with private sector and with government.
I think it's very important that we strive to be original. When I say original, there is a lot of basis for originality in our culture because of our varied and colorful heritage, which could be the solvent of contemporary expressions. If artists just strive enough to hone their craft and really transform this cultural heritage into beautiful contemporary expressions. I'm speaking from an experience that I've had this past 7 years as Festival Director of Cinemalaya, we specify to the filmmakers, those who compete, that their works, their stories, their narratives must be based on the Filipino experience. And I think they've been very successful in doing so. And many of the Cinemalaya films, which is a private sector, public sector endeavor, because we get support from partly from the government as well as from the private sector, have won accolades both here and abroad. I'll give you one example, Ang Babae sa Septic Tank, which was produced for a mere 2 million pesos, the cost of the film. And when it was shown at the commercial cinemas, it grossed 38 million.
Imagine that.
So it is possible.
Commercial cinemas here.
In the Philippines.
In the Philippines.
It is
all
possible for artists who created works not for commercial purposes, but for artistic purposes, and yet make it commercially also. So I hope all the other artistic works would be the same. In the visual arts, painters like Ronald Ventura are really earning a lot from these international auctions.
Oh yes, now that you mentioned the international auctions, it seems that a lot of Filipino artists are more successful internationally than they are here. Is that right, Amy?
Well, definitely Filipino artists are some of the most sought after in the region and internationally. So part of the quote-unquote tragedy is that they are making a name for themselves there, and yet back home the market is not as optimal as it could be. And I think part of it, going back, would be, again, we really have to educate the public and really have more understanding of and support for what they call the quote-unquote commercial aspect of art, because it is not I just want to say, just to be sensitive to some artists, for example, because even within the sector, there is a lot, there's a need for education. There is a lot of controversy when you talk about what they feel is commoditizing art. Commoditizing art,
yes,
and actually marketing commercially, making commercially viable the finished product of art. Those are two different things.
I think that's where I'd like to be able to input something, because culture has an industry. Enterprise for culture is there. I think we just have to be able to bring it to a different level, where in certain communities where you have crafts, we can elevate this by telling the story, and this is exactly what we have done with Echo Store, a private social enterprise. Echo meaning environment, community/culture, hope organization, where we go all the way to the communities and try to up-level their products so livelihood becomes sustainable. Once you have products that are there, you look within the idea of cultural tourism. That itself, through the services of the performing arts, through the food and the cuisine, allow livelihood to become sustainable, right? From there, your smaller, younger artists, your poorer artists will be given a chance to be able to express.